I'm not. Okay. Oh, hey, welcome to the Fantasy Fiends Podcast. Thanks for the no warning, Andy. Welcome to the Fantasy Fiends Podcast. What if I had been like picking my nose or something, man?
That is just a pretty classic episode of the
It's
Fantasy
a
Fiends
normal
podcast,
day in
man.
the Fantasy Fiends Podcast. I'm Stevie Collier. I'm here with Andy Peliquin. And today we are honored to have the guest, Jamie Davis, who has a lot of different careers behind him, is how I would say it, because he's not only a nurse, but he's a nurse podcaster, and now he's a fantasy podcaster, and he's also a fantasy author, entrepreneur, because I got to speak with him earlier today, and it was a ton of fun. Welcome to the show, Jamie.
Hey, thanks a lot. It's always fun to be on the other side of the microphone, to be the one getting interviewed rather than the one doing the interview. So thanks a lot.
Very welcome, man. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, as you said, I'm a nurse. I'm a retired paramedic as well. And I'm been primarily a nurse journalist in the healthcare field for the last few years, but recently started writing novels, and I'm probably best known for the Extreme Medical Services series about a paramedic who treats supernatural creatures.
You know, I'm surprised we didn't even talk about that in your podcast study. That is freaking awesome. Can you give us like an example of what would happen in one of your books?
So basically the premise is that supernatural creatures live secretly among us. Like all the mythological creatures of all the myths from all over the world live with their human neighbors, and the human neighbors, for the most part, don't know it. And so they basically are normal people, and they have normal healthcare problems. They have asthma and diabetes and all these things. And like, what makes a werewolf change? Well, if he gets low blood sugar and he starts acting weird, it makes him shift. So
Great idea. Great idea.
So he's got to get his blood sugar evened out so that he can, get him not shift into a werewolf form uncontrollably.
How does the main character see these guys, or is that a secret?
He sees them because he basically gets dispatched there, and then it's kind of the little detective work to figure out what kind of creature he's dealing with, because it's kind of considered faux pas to, ask somebody point blank, what kind of monster are you? So sometimes they'll volunteer it, but he has to kind of figure it out on his own.
Yeah, you don't want to piss off a werewolf.
Yeah.
But I guess that would make sense because it's only the low blood sugar, right?
Yeah. Otherwise, he's just an accountant, right? Or something,
Okay. Well, I know I love this idea. What about goblins though? Is that in there? Like someone
there's fae, there's goblins, so there's fairies, the creatures of all kinds, and they hide their wings under their clothing and things like that. So but they look like normal people for the most part.
Okay, I got you. So at the beginning of every podcast, we talk about something cool that's happened to us recently. I know, actually, Andy, for the first time in Fantasy Fiends podcast history, gave you a heads up. Did you have anything cool you wanted to share?
I actually did. It actually happened tonight. I have a bunch of books that are in audiobook production right now, and two of them emailed me like just in the last couple of hours to say the books are ready to be reviewed. So part of the process for me as the author is to either myself or me to get somebody to do it, is to go through with the PDF of the book and listen and proof listen to the narrator to make sure they got it right.
So is this the same for you? It's like sitting down to watch a movie is what I feel like when I get to listen to my own audiobook.
Isn't it like the most surreal thing? Like,
it's so weird.
You sit there and go, so there are things I don't even remember writing, it seems like sometimes. And to hear someone else perform my words, that is a real actor, that is a real performer, it brings life to them that I never knew existed.
Now you got me excited.
Spectacular.
Andy's, I know Andy's has a really good one. It's a British voice too, right, Andy?
Yeah, well, I think he's an American man. He does the British accent really well. Mark Vitor, I believe you pronounce his name. He did the Black Company, which was just like, I was over the moon for that. Hell yeah, I love the Black Company.
Yeah, I've got Roberto Scarlato did two of my series. He did the Accidental series, the first trilogy in that series. Accidental Thief, Accidental Warrior, and Accidental Mage. But he also did all the Extreme Medical Services books. So in the Accidental series, it's like a classic epic fantasy series with a gaming twist. So a lot of the characters are British sounding, kind of that medieval sound. But all the people in the Extreme Medical Services are American for the most part. So he handles it all really well.
Very nice. Right. And how long has this been published?
Which one? Extreme Medical Services?
Yeah, that one.
2015 was the first book.
Okay. Wow. Okay. I thought it was like brand new. And well, awesome. Andy, do you have something cool to talk about?
Why don't you talk a little bit about you, Stevie? And then we can talk about me later.
Well, now I'm nervous. No, so I do have amazing news. We talked about it. I don't even know if I released this information last Tuesday, but the Jigsaw Blade is officially launched. And yes, it is my first book within a day. It hit #1 new release in Arthurian Fantasy and is stuck there for what now? 4 days, which has been a complete blessing. I'm so grateful for it. Lots of really good reviews have come in. Super excited about that. And I mean, I my California wants to come out and say I'm super stoked. I'm super stoked. And it's weird today. I was hitting the gym and I was like on my last set of chest press, and I was thinking, you know what? The money is going to be great, but I'm just so grateful that I was able to finish something that has been such an amazing part of my life. And I just enjoyed the process. That's the thing. I enjoyed the process so very much. And I'm so excited to give an abundance of value, fun, and enjoyment to hopefully millions of readers. And it really just dropped the importance of the money and increased the idea of, I really enjoyed the process. And yeah, I'm just super excited. I've been on cloud 9 for 4 days, and I don't see myself coming down for a while. I'm reaping what I have sowed. I'm, reaping the harvest. So, which is always fun.
Yep. It's always really nice when all that hard work pays off. It's not just luck. I mean, well, it is luck. They say that success is this combination of hard work, preparation, and then a healthy dose of luck. And so it's nice when you've worked your ass off. I've been holding your hand through the entire process. You as you've been hauling ass to get this thing done, and now it's finally happening, and it's just amazing.
Yeah, awesome. Well, that's
it's so true. You can be lucky and still fall flat on your face, but if you've done the work and put the time in, when that little bit of luck comes along, you're not only do you have the luck, but you're in a position to capitalize on it. And I think that's the key.
Yeah, absolutely. They say that so many people that talk about success, they say, you got to lay the foundation for success because, like as a great example, let's say your book takes off and you become a millionaire overnight. Taxes. If you're not prepared to pay the taxes on so much money, you could be in serious trouble. Just one tiny little example that I never thought about until I saw big success. And I was like, okay, now I've got to pay a ton of taxes on this money that I've earned. I've got to find some new way to approach it. And so having all these pieces in place, when you finally do achieve the success, you're ready for it.
Oh yeah, definitely. So when the doors are opened, you are ready to walk through them. And not to get too spiritual on people, I think that doors are opening all the time. It's just when you are aware and you are prepared for it. And you know what? The cool thing about all three of us right now is we're hardworking dudes, and it's we're prepared for it. And I was actually talking to a guy at the gym today. Lots of things interesting happened at the gym today. And it was, you can write the best book in the world, but if you can't put it in front of people's eyes, what's the point? You can't be mad that no one's reading your book. So it's just about being prepared, like you said, Andy.
Yeah, definitely.
But I'm sorry, I'm like distracted with the chat. It's like, why does everyone think I'm just like this sexual?
Because you sexualize every single episode somehow.
You know what?
I'm missing the chat. I've got to get into the chat now.
Yeah, you got to pop over to the YouTube link. It's so much fun.
Someone said I was reaping my hardness or something. You know what, though? I was really good on Jamie's podcast, so the Fantasy Focus podcast. I was very well behaved, and
Dude, if I'd known you were so ripped, I would have turned the video on the Skype channel. Honestly.
Rip. You know, I'm like covered in cat hair and I'm allergic to cats, so like my eyes are all red. I look like a demon that your paramedic would come heal. But I am excited for today's topic, which
Wait, I still gotta talk about my cool stuff, CB. Come on, man.
I released a book. Yours is irrelevant. No, I'm kidding.
Oh yeah, no.
Exactly.
Something actually really awesome happened since our last podcast, which was yesterday. Today, I officially crossed the 200,000 word mark on the book that I'm working on. Don't you dare dab, Stevie. This is too cool for dabbing.
It's so cool, though.
After Avengers, dabbing is no longer cool.
Wait.
You know, I saw that post you put up about that. I think that's like totally cool, honestly.
It's insane. Like this book, both this book and the last book, it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And this one now, so I'm still leading up to the big battle at the end, and that big battle is going to be easily 10,000 words. So by the time the story is done, I wouldn't be surprised if it's about 240,000, which is basically going to be the limit that Amazon gives me for the paperback size. Like it's just going to be that big. And it's not like there's these slow moments to it, you know, where it's just, you know, expounding on things. Every single scene is relevant to the story. I mean, I do throw a little bit in there. I make the connections. The Hunter of Varamus just faced off against the Silent Champions. So that was fun. And there's a connection to the Heirs of Destiny series. You see when the Lady of Blades gets her magical sword and her anointing and things like that. But everything else is just, you know, germane to the story. It's all the ebb and flow of battle, the preparations, the outcome, the fallout, all of that. And it's just this story just kept getting bigger and bigger. But it's turning out so amazing because there's 7 characters, main characters, and each one, you know, they need their moment in the sun, and then they need their psychological development and character growth. So it's
that epic fantasy thing, dude. I've got one in the works that has been like slowly building for like over a year. And you know, it gets longer and longer and longer because I've got, you know, 4 main groups of people that I'm following around after the initial start of the book, and it's just a lot to keep track of.
Yeah, I love the slice of life stories where it's just like one character and their little world, but this one just it ran away from me a little bit.
just a bit,
man. But remember when you said that after Heirs of Darkness? No, not Heirs of Darkness.
Heirs of Destiny.
Heirs of man. Heirs of Destiny. You were like, I'm never writing a multiple point of view book ever again.
Never.
But this is multiple points of view, right?
No, it's just one point of view.
Okay,
because it's one point of view, the captain character, he's kind of got to have a moment of character growth with each person.
Okay, I got you.
And so, you know, like there's 6 characters going with him. So that's 12 moments. You know, there's going to be the moment where everything's gone to shit and then he helps pick them back up. So that's 12 character moments. And his own moments of growth. And, you know, that's another 5 or 10. And then there's the battles, there's the city, the intrigue, the mystery, the traitor, the spies, all of that kind of stuff. But the series is going to be awesome. It's going to almost be 1 million words by the time it's done.
Are you freaking kidding me?
Well, so book 1 is 110. Book 2's 220. Book 3 is going to be around 240. So that's 500,000 words, more than 500,000 words there. Book 4 could end up again around 200,000. Book 5 is a bit shorter at 60. And then book 6 could be anywhere between 100 and 200,000. Depending on how complicated my mind makes it. So yeah, it could end up upwards of 750,000 words for the 6-book series.
Wow, that's impressive. About how many words do you write a year? Do you guess? Do you keep track of that at all?
I don't really. I think last year I wrote a little over 1 million.
It's growing every year.
This year I don't think I'll hit 1 million just because I'm not pushing as hard as I did last year. Last year, I spent the last 6 months of the year writing 1 book a month, and that nearly killed my poor little brain. So yeah. I'm not pushing as hard this year. I'll still end up writing, like I said, about 500 to 700,000 words this year, just because these books keep getting longer on me. But
is that what? Is that what happens when you get older? You just start writing longer books, kind of like an old man droning on and I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Ouch.
I would say,
I think I'm the oldest person on this podcast right now. So
you're young at heart.
Careful. Don't throw the guest under the bus until the end of the podcast. That's
till live is off.
I'll say, Stevie, that with maturity comes complexity. When I started writing Hero of Darkness, and this is not a dig against you, my young Jedi friend. When I first wrote Hero of Darkness, it was one very simple premise. There was like one character growth arc for the whole book one, right? By the time I hit book 6, I had, I had written the whole Queen of Thieves series, so I had dealt with that character development, and so I had much more complexity to it. Heirs of Destiny is 4 different characters going through very different types of growth. Silent Champions is these 7 characters, and so with the more time I spend writing, the more experience I get, and of course the maturity that comes with age and research and understanding people, the more complex I'm able to understand and write into things in a way that people can understand, I guess.
Jokes aside, that's actually what I meant. I don't ever see you writing about gooch trolls. Jamie's like, what's a gooch troll? It's the troll by your gooch. But anyway, I had something to say, and it was okay. Oh, before every podcast, I had like this new idea that we could do, and I don't know if anyone else writes funny ad copy. Like I get best cost per click on my funny ad copy. So I was thinking like every podcast I'll tell you one of my funny ads. It sounds like I'm about to
not a bad idea. Honestly, have the chat room like vote on like 2 and pick the one that wins, right?
Well, I got 2. So here's one. Girls hate him. Hungry dinos love him. He's got a big sword. And the one that got rejected today, which I'm surprised, BookBub accepts almost anything. The one that got rejected today was, if you don't buy my book, I'm gonna hit my grandma. Do you not like grandmas?
You can probably guess why they rejected it.
Yeah,
I've never heard of anyone get rejected by BookBub before. So.
I got rejected by it for that one, I guess, because it had to do with assault. But I switched it to, if you don't buy my book, you'll make my grandma cry. What, do you not like grandmas? So I was thinking about doing a gooch troll one, but I'm getting scared that they're gonna block my account.
Yeah, you should have that healthy fear of the Lord in there, Stevie.
Yeah, because I have like 40 ads, and that would just suck if they all went. So in the chat, what was your favorite out of that? Even if it was the hit your Holly says run, grandma, run. Okay. Real quick, Rebecca, totally do that Photoshop. Okay. Andy, do you want to talk about the subject now?
I'd love to. It's actually a subject that's come up a lot in my Hero of Darkness series, in the sense of humanity. Like, my character, the Hunter, is half demon, half human, right? So right there's a lot going against him in terms of being human. But Jamie suggested this topic, and I found it really interesting. He's dealing with a lot of monsters, literal monsters, but treating them like humans. As humans, even what defines humanity? Is it the good and the bad traits that humans exhibit? Is it people that we can recognize? It's an interesting thing to think about and discuss, is what makes someone human.
Great. You know what? You just reminded me of something. Jamie, the reason why I was so fascinated with your topic is because I actually had a girl tell me something incredibly rude when she found out that I was a huge fan of Mortal Instruments, which is a total chick.
Yeah, I would think that would be like a good thing.
Yeah, I thought so too, but apparently it's not masculine. But I also read the Twilight series. Well, I read the first one. I couldn't get through the second one, and I enjoyed it. But I'm not saying your book is anything like Twilight. I wouldn't say that.
But I read all the Twilight series. I mean,
okay,
I had when Twilight was a thing, I had teenage daughters. So, I waited a point to read things my kids were reading and go to the movies and be engaged. And And so I was I was trying to make sure I knew what was going on in their lives, and I had to know how ridiculous Edward was to set a stand. I basically said he ruined guys for like a whole generation of women.
Edward is sexy hot. No, he's not. Yeah, he's like a total. We're gonna make this romantic, just like we did with your pod. Not romantic between us two. I'll make. I don't want Rebecca taking it the wrong way, but we like went into romance on the topic on your podcast too. But I just love the concept of your book, and I think, did we already discuss why you chose this? It was your idea for this, right, Jamie?
It is, and it's a topic I deal with a lot in more than one series that I've written. And it's because I think it's particularly poignant in today's world, where we demonize whole groups of people based upon presuppositions about them, stereotypes, and we don't give them an opportunity to prove that they're just people like us. And I've always tried to raise my kids and tell them, I don't care where you are in the world. If you're living in a grass hut in the middle of the Amazon, or if you're in a skyscraper in, New York City, you have the same basic cares and wants for your life and for your family. You want a safe place to live. You want food, you want shelter. And you work hard to achieve those things for your family. That's no different wherever you are. The human condition is the same. And so I try to address that in my books. Yes, these are quote unquote monsters, but who says they're monsters? Just because they're different doesn't make them evil. Just because somebody is a vampire doesn't mean, if somebody turns you into a vampire and you have no control over that, does that make you non-human? Or can you redeem yourself? And can you prove that you have every bit as much a right to health care or to be part of a community as anyone else?
I liked that when you said it, do these monsters deserve the same degree of healthcare? Right now, while I cook, I'm watching Supernatural. And one thing that's come up in nearly every season for the last 5 or 10 is that there's a monster, whether it's a werewolf or it's a vampire or something, that's like, I'm not harming anybody. I'm, like vampires, they're feeding on cow's blood, or they're doing things to avoid, feeding on humans. And the Winchester brothers, they're faced with this question of, should we kill them because they're monsters and they could eventually revert to their monstrous form, or should we let them live because they're trying to be human in not physiologically human, but what we as society have deemed, morality and ethics of being human? And it's such an interesting question that every episode that it comes up, they deal with it a different way. And Supernatural is definitely not the best show for deep philosophical questions, but it was.
But that's the point, and that's the point. You can address deep philosophical questions in a light manner.
Yeah.
You can deal with it in a story where you're not beating people over the head with it. In Extreme Medical Services, in the first story arc that covers the first 3 books, the real monsters are human.
I love that. I do that all the time with I actually tell people, like, when I'm talking about myself as an author, I'm like, I don't write about the monsters under the bed, but the monsters in our head. Just because we as humans, the truth is that despite everything that, that vampires do, humans have done terrible things just as bad. Look at Ted Bundy, Charles Manson. We as humans are capable of absolute horror as well as just amazing grace. So it's such a fascinating spectrum to look at, and it does really help us to examine our humanity. And I actually sort of came to this realization a while ago that all of these monsters are just a heightened example of human flaws and appetites. For example, werewolves. It's classic example of hunger. When you get hangry, right? It's just hanger to an extreme, vampires, it's addiction. All these different things, they're just different elements of what it means to be human. The Invisible Man, it is literally people who feel invisible in society. Frankenstein, someone who feels like they are an outcast and a reject, misunderstood. All of these monsters that were created during the classic era of horror are just mirrors to examine humanity from a different angle, from an exaggerated angle, but by relating them through the context of a story, we can examine what it means to, to be human, to have that like a vampire. What does it mean to have this uncontrollable desire for something? That's something we can relate to, when we see the alcoholic or the drug addict on the street. We can understand them a little bit better.
Absolutely. And I think that, that's where you can, especially in my story, some of the people's favorite characters are the creatures that are bit parts that crop up from time to time in the stories. There's this middle-aged kind of frumpy vampire who, always has girlfriend problems and crops up, and he's kind of good for some comic relief when things are getting a little too serious in the storyline. And people love it when Gibby shows up, and he just kind of rolls in and screws something up, and they have to fix it, and he's sorry, and then he goes away. But these are the things that everybody can understand. Why does everybody like Charlie Brown? Well, because everybody feels like Charlie Brown at some point in their lives, right? And I think the same thing. Everybody identifies in some aspects with the Frankenstein monster because he's an outcast. Everybody feels like an outcast at some point in their lives. Some more than others, and you can identify with that character, and sometimes you feel like you're being chased by torches and pitchforks.
Yeah. Now in your extreme medical services, how is the monster healthcare approached?
So it's kind of on the down low, and this is kind of the paramedic comes out of the academy, and he's put into this paramedic station with an ambulance that he's never heard of before. He wanted to work in the downtown area near the interstate where all the gunshot wounds and the motor vehicle accidents are, all the sexy ambulance calls.
Yeah.
And he gets put out in this like ambulance station in the middle of an industrial park in a rundown building. And he finds out that, this is a pilot program that they're trying to treat this underserved community in the city. And so it's basically, they provide care. They have a group of doctors and nurses at the ER that are kind of in on it, that, they call ahead and let them know they're coming, and if they need to bring them to the hospital for something. They just basically are providing good all around, personal health care, for people that need it. This represents any number of underserved communities in real life. There are homeless people that, don't have access to regular health care. There's all kinds of people like that in the real world. This is modeled on patients I saw when I was riding the ambulance 10 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And, kind of a sidetrack, but what is one of the worst things you've seen at night? If you don't mind me asking, you don't have to answer.
Well, it's funny. I think there's probably every first responder out there gets that question from somebody at one point or another.
And it's got to be me.
And it's the challenge that every first responder faces is that there is that one call or maybe two that stick with you forever. And it's not always what you saw. It can be something you heard.
Whoa.
Or something, or a smell from you were talking about the smell of death. You were talking about, you interviewed JT, I think, and you're talking about the smell of death. There is a smell of death. And for me, it's actually a burn victim was one of the very first patients I had as a solo paramedic. And, every now and then I still smell that, and years later.
You still smell it, and I'm guessing it was the worst thing you've ever smelled.
It's just a vivid sense memory, and for me, it was an odor. And so stupid stuff like that odor will come back to me sometimes, and I'll just have to stop and take a break, take a moment to gather myself.
Coming home to talk to your wife a good way to like let it off, or did you not do that?
Funny story. So my wife learned very quickly that what my way of blowing off steam and getting it out of my system was I came home and started cleaning the house.
What?
Honest to God, I would come home and I wouldn't talk to her. I would just kind of say hello, and then I would come in and I would just start straightening up. And next thing I know, I'm in the garage, like cleaning the garage or cleaning the basement or some like mindless task that I could just set myself to while I let my brain work through what I was dealing with. And she learned early on that meant I had a bad call. You know, I had something happen that day that really affected me, and I didn't want to burden her with it, but I still had to get my mind wrapped around it. And for me, doing some work, and it's actually a healthy way to deal with it. Some people drink or turn to drugs or, become abusive. So there's a lot of people in that field that have poor coping mechanisms, let's say. Good coping mechanisms, go to the gym. Those natural endorphins you work out of your body when you're working and lifting weights and stuff actually help your brain heal from these types of things. For me, it was doing some kind of regular physical activity, even moderate or minor physical activity, just keeping myself busy while I worked through the problem.
I'm sure writing really helped eventually once you started writing to bring that catharsis and be able to express. I think as someone on the autism spectrum, expressing emotions is very difficult for me. Being able to write them down with this dissociation between how I feel and how my character feels, it makes it a lot easier for me to put it out there. I'm sure in a way that you felt the same when you were able to express these things that you felt that you really couldn't put into words even when you were on these calls and you saw these horrible things, and then you wrote it out and it sort of walked your brain through this emotional journey until you understand how you felt. No?
Yeah, it's one of those things that, you only share it with people that I've talked to my wife about some of these things. And actually having some distance behind me, being retired, has helped put some distance on it and give me perspective. But there's some things, that you only talk about with someone who's been through something like that.
Definitely.
There are people, friends of mine, that when we get together, we start off usually by sharing the goofy stuff, and 2 hours later we're deep into the heaviest stuff we were ever dealing with. But it's that sharing, that group think that that we can all say we all had that experience that has weighed on us in one way or another, helps us cope with it.
You see that a lot with military people as well, or cops. It's just like just understanding, like when people say, where'd you serve? And then, like I'm just watching Magnum PI right now. It's a show, and the guy's a former military, and they're like, "Where'd you serve?" "Oh, I was in Bagram." And the guy says, "Oh yeah, I was in, whatever place he was in." And then there's just this understanding between them because of these shared experiences that forms a bond immediately. That like if you and I met and we talked about something, it would take us so much longer to get to that level of understanding. Whereas if you met with one of these fellow paramedics, even someone you were, totally brand new, you would come to an understanding and have that foundation much more quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I've been, when I've traveled places, when I was still working actively, I would make it a point, if I passed by a firehouse or an ambulance station, I would go up and knock on the door and introduce myself. Like I actually went to the firehouse in St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and just started having a conversation. And you're right, it's instantly, it was like, oh, he's part of the brotherhood. Okay, I get it. You can have this conversation and share and have a shared experience, and you're instantly let in because you can say, and they're like, oh, cool. Well, what's your day like? And you start talking about the same kind of things. And that was true. We saw that experience happened after 9/11, and all the firefighters that had died in that horrible day, along with all the people in the towers. And the next day, every firehouse around the world had a moment of silence at the same time. And I remember distinctly watching that, France, Istanbul, in the Middle East, in the Far East, in Australia, everywhere. They all stood out. Unless they were on a call, they all stood out in front of their station at attention and had a moment of silence for the firefighters that went down in the towers. And it is what it is. You share that. They know that it could have been them.
Yikes. Yeah, we actually did something similar. I was in, I think, 6th grade. No, like 3rd grade. And I went to a Lutheran school at the time, and we all went out into the parking lot and we had like this timed watch, and all the Lutheran schools in the U.S. at the same time had a moment of silence, and it was really cool. I totally forgot about that until you said that. It was really interesting. So,
talking about that, it just made me think that's probably one of the things that bonds us together as humans more than anything else is shared experiences. Like when it comes down to it, how many animals would you have walking into war with you? You've got attack dogs, or bomb dogs and stuff like that. So there is that shared connection. But as a paramedic, were there any dogs on the job at all?
Not with us. I mean, the police had canine units and stuff like that. Usually if there was a dog involved, it was because they'd bitten somebody. Or when you go to somebody's house, the dogs are, very protective of their humans. So usually the dispatchers would say, if there's any animals, please close them off in another room, something like that. So that would be done before we got there. But every now and then you'd have a situation where you had to kind of befriend the family pet because you had to get to their patient, to your patient, their master or their family member.
Yeah. Well, the point of that was like, as humans, we are kind of the only ones who can have the same experiences as humans. A dog, right? A dog's experience in war or in police work is vastly different from the human experience. So this shared understanding of trauma, of emotions, both the good and bad side of the spectrum, this is one of the things that makes us human. And when you're dealing with monsters, let's say like vampires do have quite the range of emotions as well. I mean, depending on the type of vampire, obviously, but from what I'm guessing, your vampires.
Well, in my story, they're people like everybody else. I mean, they live longer, they drink blood, but they're people. They're no different than any other person aside from the thing that makes them different, if that makes sense. It's like you have brown hair, somebody else has blonde hair, somebody else has red hair. You're all human except for the thing that makes you a little bit different from each other. And so that's what I do in the story, is I just try to constantly point out that no matter who you are, you still, there's a scene where there's a 7-Eleven convenience store across the street from a museum, and they get called for an injured subject in the store, and they get there. Well, the mummy in the exhibit at the museum wanted a Slim Jim. It was like, and so it's one, and then and he came unwrapped going across the street, and he got injured. So then they had to rewrap him and put him back. But I mean, he was just an ordinary guy going out for a snack, right? That could happen to anybody. Anybody could go out for a snack and, have a blowout and run off the road or something. They're just normal people.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Well, why don't we get to a little taste of this extreme medical services thing? Because I'm really interested in seeing what it's like.
Do that.
All
it
right.
was you this time, not me.
I know it's me. So where does this take place? What city?
Well, it takes place in a fictional city right near where I live. So I live in a kind of rural area, but I made it a little more urbanized so that I could write about places I knew, but kind of make it grow up. So it's called Elk City, but I live in a place near a place in Maryland called Elkton.
Okay. Maryland. So
Ooh, Maryland. My parents just got back from there.
So it's near where I am. Queen Baltia.
Awesome. How many different voices are there in this?
3. There's Dean, the main character, who's the new paramedic just out of school. There's his partner, who is his boss right now, like making sure he learns things. He's a probie. And so that's Bryn Garvey, is his female boss and partner. And then there's the growling werewolf who will, I don't think he gets his voice back in this scene. So there's just 2.
Werewolf.
He doesn't actually have a voice. He just makes noises.
Oh,
okay.
Dang it.
Why don't you do Bryn, Stevie, and I'll do Dean. Unless Jamie, do you prefer doing a character or the narration?
I'll do the narration if you want.
All right, let's do it.
And wait, Bryn is the head guy.
The head girl.
The head girl.
Of course, Andy. Of course.
Channel your inner female, dude.
Stevie always gets the female voices. Oh, I'm trying to remember what. Oh, it was in the first couple of seasons of Bones, where every time they recreate the death scene, they always have the same intern be the dead guy, and he's always complaining, "Why am I the dead guy?" And so that's happening here.
That is me. Wait, and how do you say? Is that glucagon?
Glucagon.
Glucagon. Yep. Okay, I apologize if I mispronounce any.
It's all right.
Any medical stuff.
I have to do that with my narrators too. It's all good.
Oh yeah. And remind me to tell you a funny story after this, but I'm ready.
Sounds good. All right, here we go. Dean couldn't believe what was happening. He was in a darkened bedroom lit only by a single overhead light and the flashlights of him and his partner. A struggle was taking place on the bed in the corner, accompanied by grunting, growls, and shouts of the two paramedics and their patient. A diminutive, dark-haired female was wrestling with a large, snarling, furry creature on the bed.
Get me the glucagon,
Bryn Garvey said.
Right now.
Bryn's a lot stronger than she looks, Dean thought, as he struggled to figure out how to reconstitute the powdered drug in the preloaded syringe. She was only about 5'2" tall, and her long, straight brown hair pulled back in a ponytail made her look younger than her 34 years.
Proby, I need that syringe,
she said through gritted teeth.
I'm coming. I've never used one of these prefab syringes before.
Dean finally got the syringe assembled and handed it to his preceptor.
Here.
I can't do the injection. I'm a little busy here,
she said as she grabbed one of the creature's flailing arms and pinned it to its body with one leg. She avoided the claws that had spontaneously grown out of the creature's fingertips.
You do it, Proby. It's time you stepped up your game and showed me why you got this gig to begin with.
The struggle on the bed intensified as the snarling creature seemed to sprout more body hair and grew even stronger.
Do it! Glucagon, now!
The last was almost a whisper. Hesitantly, Dean stepped forward and injected the syringe into the hairy thigh of the creature struggling with his partner. As the beast continued to struggle, Bryn muttered under her breath.
Humans are much easier to deal with.
A normal-looking man wearing the same shorts and t-shirts as the creature Bryn had been wrestling with was sitting on the edge of the bed eating a peanut butter sandwich. I'll do his voice. I'm sorry, Bryn. I must have dozed off after my insulin shot tonight.
You've got to be more careful, Bob,
Bryn said as she zipped up the medication bag.
That's the third time this month. You're going to hurt someone one of these days. Here, sign this transport refusal so we can go.
She handed the patient a tablet computer that Bob signed with a finger. The paramedics picked up their gear and headed out to the ambulance. Dean climbed into the passenger seat, staring straight ahead as his new partner and preceptor started the engine. The diesel motor growled to life.
So werewolves are...
Dean started.
Real.
She finished.
And whatever anything causes a lichen, and they prefer being called lichen, to have altered mental status, they lose control and shapeshift. That is the cause of the attacks, by the way. They aren't that bloodthirsty. Bob's a CPA and a member of the Chamber of Commerce.
And our job is to...
Dean started.
Treat known or suspected unusuals who need emergency medical attention.
Bryn glanced over at him.
It's not all that tough. They're mostly human, but not. You apply human anatomy and physiology, then diagnose the problem based on what you know about the type of unusual you're dealing with.
Dean shook his head.
So I worked my butt off to graduate at the head of my class, aced my NREMT exam on the first try, and I get rewarded by getting assigned to be a paramedic for monsters?
Unusuals,
Bryn said as she gunned the engine and pulled away from the...
Look, Dean, I know this is a bit of... Look, Dean, I know this is a bit of shock to you. Believe me, I didn't ask to break in a new partner. The job is hard enough without dealing with a brand new paramedic unfamiliar with this type of specialized work. I was hoping to get paired with somebody who had some real street experience. Someone who knows what kind of things we're likely to run into. But it looks like we're stuck with each other.
Unusuals, werewolf CPA, lichen. Dean's mind was trying to put it all into perspective. She glanced over at him as she drove. She must have seen the shocked look on his face and shook her head.
Say something. I need to know you're tracking what I'm telling you.
After a pause, she raised her voice.
Dean, answer me.
What do you want me to say?
Dean snapped back.
I finished school and start on what I think is my dream job, saving lives, making a difference, and now I'm I'm not even sure what I'm doing.
You are saving lives and making a difference to people who don't need to be ostracized. You can apply for a transfer from the chief after the shift is done. For now, you need to listen carefully to what I have to say, or you're going to end up getting hurt. Worse, you could get me hurt.
Bryn glared at him.
I need you to listen to me like you would any of your academy preceptors. On a call, do what I say. When I say it, without question. A lot of the folks we serve are a bit prickly about how the rest of society views them. We need to tread carefully. For you, that means stay right next to me and keep your mouth shut. When I ask for something from our kit or the back of the unit, you hop to it and get what I need. Got it?
Yeah, I guess so.
Dean replied. He looked out the window as the Elk City streetlights went by in the night, the overhead lights forming little pools of light surrounded by what he realized were too many shadows. Shadows that apparently really do have monsters hiding in them. He looked over at Bryn.
Tell me again what just happened back there? Clearly you've been to that house before and knew that guy.
Bob is an okay guy.
She began.
We didn't start to get calls to his house until recently. He and his wife are separated, and I think she used to help him treat his diabetes and keep his blood sugar levels even. Since she left, we've been there a bunch of times to handle what dispatch alerts as an agitated subject.
Bryn pulled the ambulance into a strip mall parking lot and stopped in front of the dollar store. Putting the vehicle in park, she turned in her seat and looked at Dean. The overhead lights in the parking lot lit up the left side of her face.
Look, Dean, you must have some mad skills or you wouldn't have been assigned to this unit. You just need to take the stuff you know and apply it to a new situation. Unusuals are people, just like us, for the most part. Think of them as having a comorbid medical condition that affects the current problem they're having.
Dean felt a throb between his temples. He knew his first shift might be tough, but this was off the charts. She continued.
In Bob's case, he's a lichen. He has a disorder that causes him to change form when he gets upset or loses control somehow. Most of the time, lichens manage their whole lives without anyone knowing they're any different. The full moon thing is just a myth. It takes some medical condition or trauma to cause them to lose control and change. In Bob's case, we never went to see him before his marital status situation changed. Now that his diabetes is out of control, he starts shifting the minute... Oh, wait, hold on. Messed up. Now that his diabetes is out of control, he starts shifting the minute his sugar levels get low enough to affect his mental status. Normal people become anxious, agitated, sweaty, diaphoretic, and thirsty. Bob becomes a hungry wolf man.
She stopped, the pause getting Dean's attention. He looked up from staring at his lap and peered at her.
But how am I supposed to know what to do for him?
What do you do for any diabetic with low blood sugar?
She asked.
What if you can't start an IV and give D50? Then what do you do?
I give them glucagon intramuscularly. The hormone makes the liver release sugar stores into the blood and
gets him the higher blood sugar level needed to reverse the shift to Wolfman.
Bryn said, finishing his thought.
You do know this stuff.
She turned back to the front and shifted the ambulance back into gear, then pulled out of the parking lot and onto Route 40.
Nobody gets sent to the station if they're an idiot. We don't need cookie-cutter medics here who can only follow protocols. There are no specific protocols for unusuals. What we need are true medical professionals who can apply what they know critically to a given situation and improvise when needed. Someone must have seen that in you, or you wouldn't have been sent to Station U.
Dean fell into his own thoughts and looked ahead as they crossed through the green light at an intersection.
That seemed awfully dangerous back there. What about the old EMS mantra of scene safety first and foremost?
Bryn chuckled.
Well, there are two answers to that. First, no scene is ever really safe. What that mantra means is to be aware of potential dangers and proceed as safely as you are able.
She held up her right hand to forestall his objection.
Within reason, I know there are situations that require us to call for special assistance before proceeding to the scene. For unusuals, well, let's just say that the police have their own version of Station U. Actually, we don't call them that often, which brings us to the second answer.
She turned into an industrial park and headed back toward the last building.
Remember that extra set of vaccinations you got after you completed your class?
The hepatitis B and tetanus boosters?
Those weren't Hep B or tetanus shots. At least, that's not all they were. You got zapped with an experimental batch of the latest and unusual prevention vaccines. Didn't you read the fine print in the release they had you sign?
No. Why?
He replied.
Wait, you mean they snuck them in without making me aware of what they were giving me? That's malpractice.
Possibly. No, probably.
Bryn corrected herself.
I've been told it's covered under some Homeland Security thing. Anyway, if you read the whole release before you got your shot, you would have realized you were opting into additional vaccinations as required to perform your duties.
She shrugged.
I've never known anyone to have a negative reaction, and I've seen what can happen to someone who gets exposed without them. All in all, you are better off with them.
She turned the wheel as she pulled in front of the bay doors at their station.
Hop out and back me in.
Dean popped his seatbelt off and jumped out, walking around to stand by in the ambulance bay doorway as the garage door started to go up. She pulled the ambulance up, lining up the back end so she had a straight shot to back in. Dean saw her looking for him in the driver's side mirror. He checked behind himself, then slowly walked backward, directing her into the bay. Bryn shut the unit down, jumped out, and plugged the ambulance into the shoreline power plug hanging from the ceiling. Dean waited, then asked,
"What's next, boss?"
We need to replace the glucagon we used, then write up our run report.
She answered.
Let me show you how we get our drugs out of the provisioning machine in the back. It's kind of like a giant snack machine, but instead of food, it dispenses medications.
She led him to a big metal box with windows and doors in it.
Any medications we use is kept stocked in here. If it needs refrigeration or climate control, it's on this side.
She gestured to the left side of the box with small separate windowed doors.
If it's stable at room temperature, it's on this side.
She pointed to the right side of the machine. Dean saw familiar meds, epinephrine, atropine, bicarb. Bryn pulled her photo ID badge from her uniform and swiped it in the machine, then entered a 4-digit code.
When we get you in the system and you have your ID badge, you'll be able to do this too. It automatically keys the med dispensed to your ID in the computer. When you start a patient care report, you can pull up meds used and replenished.
She selected a letter number combination, and after a few seconds, a thump was heard at the bottom of the box. She reached down into the open bin in the bottom of the dispenser and pulled out a new dose of pre-constituted glucagon.
Go put this back in the med bag where you got the original dose. Then meet me back in the squad room. I'll get started on the report.
Dean climbed into the back of the parked ambulance and looked around. It sure looked like a regular ambulance, he thought. He pulled the med bag out of its cabinet and replaced the box dose of glucagon. Turning off the interior light, he climbed out of the back of the rig and shut the doors.
What have I gotten myself into?
He muttered to himself. That's it.
Very nice. That was awesome.
Very fun.
I don't believe you're really a paramedic, though. No. None of that could have been helped by the... Yeah, you're definitely a paramedic. That was so cool. I could definitely see the expertise.
Yeah, and actually, I dial it back a good bit. The first book, biggest complaint I got in the first book, and this was the first book I ever wrote, was that there was too much detail, like too much medical detail in the first book. So I urge anybody that's listening to this that gets the first book, just plow through that stuff. It's really not that much, but it was a complaint, and I dial it way back in subsequent books so that there's just a mere mention of a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, I like medical stuff. I think that's cool. But I mean, anyway, that was an awesome read.
But all the medicine's real. Like all the stuff I talk about, all the medications, all the doses, all that stuff in all the books are real treatments for these problems.
Do you increase it for the bigger the monster is, or?
Oh yeah, the doses would be different. A lot of doses are body weight based. So, we would estimate the person's weight and then multiply that weight times the number of milligrams or something and come up with a dose.
And then you probably have to like let's say for a werewolf in full lichen mode, you'd probably have to multiply that say by 1.75 or something to figure out how many millimeters a heavier muscled. It's just math.
It's just math. Yeah. I mean,
Right.
there's a lot of that kind of math, and there's a lot of guesstimation involved, most adult males that aren't severely overweight are 100 kilograms because it's just easy to do the math.
Yeah,
unless they tell me they're 92 kilograms, they're going to be 100 kilograms because
well, when you say it's just math, that still makes me sweaty. So
believe me, it makes me sweaty too.
does it? I would have like a calculator attached to my wrist if I were a paramedic. No, but I'm sure
you'd have those Casios.
Yeah. So Jamie, where can people find you?
Well, they can find me over at jamiedavisbooks.com. And you can also find me on Facebook if you search for Jamie Davis Books. I'm there as well. And my Twitter handle and most of my social media things are related back to my days as a podcaster and medical journalist. So I'm the Podmedic, PODMEDIC. Podmedic is where you can find me in most social media places like Instagram and Twitter and other places.
Very cool.
Cool. Awesome. Well, any other updates, Andy?
Nope, that's it. Next week, we will be talking about the one and only Stevie Collier and his brand new book.
Woo!
Really? Wow. We haven't done a Stevie Collier podcast in over a year.
Well, it's been a long time since you launched a book, Stevie.
Yeah, it was like last October. So it's been way over a year. Not last October, but the October before that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the Fantasy Fiends podcast has been a long time. Let's quit. I'm done. No. All right, Jamie, thank you so much for being on the air today.
It was a pleasure being here, and it was great talking to you earlier. And you're going to be featured on my podcast, the Books and Authors Fantasy Podcast, coming up next Monday, so we can get you out before your next book comes out.
Awesome, thank you so much, Andy. Anything else?
Nope, that's it for me.
Awesome. Guys, viewers, listeners, thank you so much. You smelt amazing today. What's that cologne you're wearing? I love it. You're looking sexy. Have you lost weight? Anyway, I hope you have a great night. I love you all, and we'll see you next Thursday for my podcast. Good night.